The training sessions had begun again at the Magic Academy, and with them, the tension among the students. Logwell informed Cariat, the Emperor's wand, about the start of the trials, but Cariat showed little interest. Although he held a prestigious position, he did not enjoy representing the wand's faction. However, the situation at the academy was critical, as the Sovereign of Light was still campaigning while the protective barrier seemed to be faltering. In the training field, young mages like Will, Lihanna, and Wignall prepared to face challenges. Will, determined to stand out and reach his goal of getting to Elfie, encountered difficulties when a swarm of crimson ants surrounded him. Though he tried to protect his companions, Wignall harshly criticized him for his lack of combat skill, especially when compared to Lihanna, a mage from a knightly lineage who excelled in close combat. Will recalled how Werkner had taught him that the most important magic in the dungeon was neither attack nor defense, but the search spell, which allowed the detection of enemies and anomalies, essential for the survival of any mage in such dangerous environments. Despite his efforts, Will felt overwhelmed, unable to fulfill his role as a shield properly, constantly overshadowed by others. Julius and Wignall's team advanced swiftly, eliminating monsters before Will could even intercept them. Although Lihanna defended him, stating that Will had not yet had the chance to prove his true potential, doubts about his abilities persisted. Aware of his limitations, Will decided to work harder and carried monster remains, since he couldn't absorb magical remains like the others, to earn credits, though this caused frustration within his group. Despite everything, Will didn't give up. Even though his companions saw him as a burden, he was determined to improve and prove his worth, knowing that the path to his goal would be difficult, but he was willing to give it his all. The training continued, but for Will, frustration grew. Although he knew the road would be difficult, facing the reality of not contributing as much as his companions hit him hard. While the rest of the group advanced with superior abilities, Will found himself relegated to the role of a pack mule, carrying supplies and watching from the shadows. "I can't do anything," he kept repeating to himself. Lihanna, always pragmatic, mentioned it was time to rest. However, Julius complained about the lack of security in their surroundings, and Wignall, an arrogant elf, decided to summon an illusory fortress made of flames to protect the group from potential monsters. Colette, impressed, watched the elven magic in awe, while Will, resigned, distributed rations to the others. But when he tried to hand food to Wignall, the latter made it clear he didn't want to be touched by someone unworthy. Though hurt by Wignall's elitist attitude, Will chose not to dwell on it, recognizing the cultural differences between elves and human mages. The group had a clear objective: the luminous Nabarus, the guardian of the 10th floor, a creature valued at 110 credits. This monster was the biggest challenge of the training, and Lihanna, determined, had formed the group specifically to defeat it. Although the magnitude of the challenge frightened Will, he also saw it as an opportunity to prove his worth. As they advanced through the dungeon, something seemed off. The group encountered the corpses of several monsters, something none of them had expected, as they had taken the shortest route, and no other group could have gotten ahead of them. The atmosphere in the dungeon became increasingly surreal and silent, and the sense of imminent danger intensified. Suddenly, Lihanna gave the order to use the search spell, but confusion grew when they discovered the monsters had been killed recently and not by magical means. Whoever had done it had managed with sheer brute force. The tension rose, and as the group tried to understand what was happening, Will alerted them to a new threat. The group was facing a critical moment. While Colette and Lihanna cast spells to prepare, an unexpected tremor shook the dungeon. The ground beneath their feet gave way, sending Will and the others tumbling down to the dangerous lower floors. Suddenly, they found themselves on the 11th floor, a territory beyond the Academy's control, reserved only for the most experienced mages. Julius was in shock, unable to accept the reality that they had fallen into such a perilous area. "This can't be happening," he shouted, while Shounen, more pragmatic, reminded him that they had no choice but to keep moving forward. Lihanna, injured from the fall, warned that they were separated from the rest of the group. Colette, worried about her friend Serfort, knew that if they didn't regroup soon, they wouldn't survive the dungeon's threats. Meanwhile, on the upper floors, chaos erupted. Eliza and Werkner, academy professors, were dealing with a monster stampede that had destroyed their base camp. They didn't know what was happening on the lower floors but suspected their students were in danger. With the control devices destroyed and the threat of more attacks, the academy decided to cancel the training and send a rescue team. On the 11th floor, Will and Wignall were struggling to stay alive. Wignall, still wounded and lost in memories of failure and rejection by his people, distrusted Will. However, Will couldn't abandon him, despite the disdain Wignall showed him as a proud elf. Despite everything, Will insisted on helping him, knowing that only by working together could they survive. As they advanced through the dark, dangerous corridors, Will warned Wignall about overusing the search spell, which could exhaust him in such a treacherous place. But Wignall, full of pride and frustration, didn't want to accept Will's advice. "Shut up," he yelled, angry at their situation and his own helplessness. Suddenly, a new monster appeared, a Jerjiza, a demonic boar lurking in the shadows. The creature had no eyes but could detect its prey by smell. Wignall tried to use illusions to defend himself, but his efforts were futile. "Illusions don't work on them," Will warned, just before stepping in and saving him from a deadly attack. Wignall, humiliated and ashamed, couldn't understand how Will, whom he had always looked down on, could be so strong and remain so calm. How can he keep fighting, he wondered. Throughout their journey in the dungeon, Wignall began to see that Will wasn't just a capable fighter but had turned his experience and knowledge into true wisdom. Wignall, on the other hand, felt like a failure, unable to meet the expectations his race and people had placed on him. But as danger continued to loom, Will never lost faith in his companion.